Our old business, we are going to have another panel on the implementation of Prop B that was brought into our attention for last month by Commissioners Bernhardt and Hassenfluck. And I know Vice Chair Ramirez also had a recommendation for further action. Go ahead.
I just wanted to note that Carly Jo Dixon is listed as attendees, and she was going to be one of our speakers during this portion. So,
this is City Hall. Carly, if you can hear me, we'll need you to rejoin if you're joining from your browser and use the app, or you can just try logging out and logging in again. At this point, we cannot make you a panelist.
I can try that. I logged in through the link y'all sent me, so I can do that again.
Thank you.
Great. And if you don't mind, Vice Chair Ramirez, do you mind introducing, I know Commissioners Bernhardt and Hassenfluck sponsored this, but I know you've done a lot of work getting these attendees. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick little intro, that would be great. And introducing the panelists, if you could.
Yes, we decided that it would be a good idea to have a follow-up discussion to sort of address just more of the community perspective on the implementation of Prop B. So we have Sasha Rose and Candace Swarm from Austin Mutual Aid and Carly Jo Dixon from the Texas Defense Project kind of speaking from that perspective. And we also have Diana Gray here to speak a little bit about the HEAL initiative. And the intention behind that was to sort of just show the contrast between some different ways that this is being dealt with across the city. So.
Perfect. And would you like to start with Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Wonderful, Ms. Gray. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Diana Gray here, Homeless Strategy Officer with the City of Austin. And so happy to share with you a little bit about where we are on the HEAL initiative, which is the Housing Focused Encampment Assistance Link, which was passed by Council beginning in February of this year. I did forward a slide deck to staff not too terribly long before the meeting, so if I need to give it a go without that, I am happy to do so. I'll just kind of start going through that presentation. And Nellie, if you or others are able to bring up the slide deck, all the better. If not, we'll make it work. So as I said, the HEAL initiative was passed by Council in February of this year, February 4th. And the intent of the resolution, as stated therein, is to immediately house people or immediately shelter people and with a path to permanent housing for the unsheltered population, housing first approach, so that we are going in and targeting encampments for clearance, but we're not just asking people to leave, but rather offering concrete resources for immediate shelter and housing in the midterm, but with dedicated resources attached to that. And so as I said, this is framed as phase one of the HEAL initiative. And for that phase one, Council asked us to look at 4 sites across the city, in North Austin, East Austin, South, and in the Central Business District, with some parameters around the characteristics of those sites, et cetera, but without necessarily giving us particular addresses to work from. And so just in terms of the components of the initiative, the way it has been put together, first of all, there is an outreach and engagement component. So we have been working predominantly with our host team, which is the Homeless Outreach Street team, as you know, a multidisciplinary team, which includes staff from the community health paramedics, integral care, downtown Austin community court social workers, and APD. And in some cases, PATH team, which is another outreach team that is staffed solely out of integral care for areas outside of the Central Business District. So that outreach occurs, take assessment of who is at the site, make an offer of shelter and of housing. And at that point, usually the move would happen fairly quickly thereafter. At that point, then folks are offered shelter. We opened up in June, the Southbridge shelter, which we can speak a little bit more about here in a moment, but it's a converted hotel. So we're talking about non-congregate shelter, very different and often easier for people to accept going into a hotel room rather than a cot, with very little privacy and congregate shelter. But the idea of that shelter is that it is truly bridge shelter, that even as people are entering, we already know that they are going to be we have a service provider waiting at the ready to enroll them in their program with both case management and housing rental supports available to them. So that it is really just a matter of getting them enrolled, finding the housing, of course, working through the application and acceptance process, but finding them permanent housing so that their stay in the bridge shelter is relatively brief. And then I think one of the things that is, HEAL was passed before Prop B passed. And so I think, there was a lot of very vigorous discussion on the dais and, spirited comment from the community about what it meant to be doing this work and seeking voluntary compliance. At the time, it did not, we were potentially relocating sites or people who were at sites where it may have at that time been legal to be camping. That is no longer the case, but we are still really focused on, the belief and our experience so far reiterates this, that people want shelter and housing, and so people are typically voluntarily relocating. I think that if we could go to slide 3, I think is next. So actually, we'll go ahead and go to 4. So essentially, as I said, there were 3 sites that were identified through this first phase of the initiative. Should there be a phase 2 of HEAL, and we continue to do this kind of work, one of the tasks that's we will be charged with is identifying a process for prioritizing encampments with a real eye to health and safety, as well as equity in terms of how do we target these resources, looking at for example, at the Ben White site, which I'll describe here in a moment, it had, multiple pedestrian vehicle fatalities, right, and accidents. So really looking at flood risk, fire risk, vehicle risk, et cetera. The reality is that, as you can imagine, it is not healthy nor safe for people to be living outdoors for the most part in general. So there's all kinds of different dangers, but one of the things that we will be doing as we complete this initial phase is really looking to develop a data-driven way to identify where we do the work. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So one of the reasons, council did not explicitly identify the locations of the sites, both to give staff some latitude to adjust as needed, but also because we wanted to have an orderly process and not have the perverse sort of impact of drawing people into a site that we were seeking to clear and then not being able to shelter any of them because we didn't have space in shelter. But we have now completed 2 sites beginning in June. So over the last 2 months, we relocated people who were encamped at the Terrasas Library. That was about 20 people. And then just a couple of weeks ago, worked on the encampment at the underpass at Ben White and Manchac, and that was about 50 people. So we still have 2 sites to do. I anticipate us completing the 3rd site this month, and then are still hoping that we can complete the 4th site by the end of the summer. That really we do at that point, it becomes dependent on having enough room and shelter through permanent housing placements as people move out of shelter and into housing, that we have space in shelter. I would say that just in terms of numbers, over 90% of people who were offered shelter and housing took it. So it sort of belies the thing that we hear sometimes, which is people just really don't want to go to shelter. They don't want housing. They want to live outside. That has not been our experience thus far. Of the 70 people who were transferred to Southbridge, 67-ish at last count, as of last Friday or so at least, remained. We will have people who have interaction with the criminal justice system in one way or the other outside of the shelter environment and go to jail, or we have had people who have been hospitalized for primary care needs, et cetera. And then we will have people who leave or where there could be a behavioral issue and are asked to leave. I will say that is generally less of an issue when you have a non-congregate shelter and people can be in a private space, right? But it is something that we're going to continue to work through to see how that plays. I think it'll be really important for us to understand. I'm very encouraged at how many people are saying yes and coming indoors. You know, what does the attrition look like? What's our real success is getting people into permanent housing and them staying there. So we are in the process now of enrolling those individuals who have moved from both the Terrasses and the Ben White sites into the programs of their housing service providers, which in this case are integral care and family elder care. I'm actually guessing that the number is higher than 50 because it's been several days since I got an update from them. But, you know, really they're ready to enroll people as they come into shelter and start serving them. We haven't had housing placements yet, but I would anticipate that would begin this month. So we would begin to see that movement into permanent housing. Next slide. The previous one, yeah. So this is the Southbridge shelter, and I'll tell you that I'm proud that we stood it up and got it running. It is not the renovation is not fully complete yet. So if you happen to drive by, it's on northbound I-35 Frontage Road near Old Wharf. That it still has construction fencing around it from when the renovation was happening. We saw some work to do on the exterior landscaping and fencing, et cetera. But I think that overall, you know, certainly the experience of being in a non-congregate shelter and having their own room is something that people are valuing. I want it to look even better. Opened in June, our contract, we're contracting with Front Steps to operate the shelter. They were not quite ready to operationalize in June, and so we actually stood it up with city staff and temporary employees. We had some kind of a pool of available folks who had, been involved in the operations of pro lodges across the city. So similar operations that we were able to draw from, but really stood the facility up very quickly and happily now have passed it off for the longer term operation with Front Steps. Next slide. So we'll go through this quickly. This is just sort of Terrasses immediately after, or as people were still moving. We still had a few folks there. And then afterwards, and then the next slide is a photo of the Ben White site before and after. I do want to comment on this because people have said, and I share concern, that what we are featuring is the before and after of the site and not the impact on the individuals who are being relocated. However, we also don't take pictures of individuals without their permission and consent. And so there's some privacy issues there. But I want to just, I think, be clear that while I think this visual, is an example of what it looks like at a site after the clearance, the real value here is for the people, who are sheltered and ultimately, we hope and believe permanently housed. And I think that might go. Let's go to the next slide. I can't remember if we have any others. This is just one of our partners at Integral Care, who is helping us with both We do have on-site behavioral health workers at Southbridge. We are moving toward, we believe, opening up a second shelter, which will also have that on-site support. It is currently during business hours. I think we probably can have some improvements in terms of supports on site over time. But with that, I will just take questions. I'm sure you've got a few.
Thank you so much. Do you mind taking the slide down so I can see the dais again, please, AV? I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Do we want to, let's go ahead and open it up to questions for Ms. Gray, and then we will have our friends from Austin Mutual Aid present. We still have about 20 minutes, so I think we're
great.
On time.
If it's better, if you would prefer to have other folks present and then take questions, that's fine too, whatever works.
Let's see if we have any questions right off the bat, and then maybe after, we'll go through it again. Commissioner Kirikoff, go ahead.
Yes, and thank you, Diana, for your presentation. And I think it's great the 90% accepting the offer to be housed. That's very encouraging. My question is, what kind of reason did the 10% give that they don't want to accept your offer?
I don't have a short list. It is only, about 5 people at this point. Sometimes what will happen is people won't give a reason, but they may just leave the site. So for example, when we had the couple of days of outreach and saying, we're going to be relocating, et cetera, they may not give a reason. They may just go from one day to the next. But I think it's a good question, and it's one that I can pose to our staff and the host teams about what are you hearing? And the other piece is that, our commitment is that so long as we have space at a shelter, if one of those individuals comes back and says, I've changed my mind, I'd like to go into shelter, that offer stands.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Hasselflug, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the permanent housing portion and what that's going to look like for them. And I know you say you're just going to be starting it this month, but what kind of the timeline on how you anticipate to move them in there and how quickly?
Sure. So the permanent housing resource, the largest permanent housing resource attached to this initiative are rapid rehousing programs. And rapid rehousing programs offer a pretty robust but time-limited case management and rental supports. And so that could be anywhere from 3 months up to 2 years of assistance with rent and case management should people need it. Rapid rehousing is almost always scatter site in the community. So one of the roles of the service provider and their staff is to help people find an apartment, right? And that is done often in collaboration with ECHO and some of our other community partners who have relationships with landlords who will accept a conventional applicant. That we don't anticipate that people coming into housing are going to have fantastic credit scores or great rental histories or any of those things. So there really there are existing relationships with landlords, but those nonprofits are working all the time to place people. What we know, I think probably our best marker for the timeline is what has been happening through the Pro Lodges, where we also had rapid rehousing placement for individuals living there. And that the average from the time someone was enrolled with that service provider to housing was somewhere between 60 to 70 days. So a little over 2 months, which is why I say, because we moved our first 20 folks in June, we would expect to begin to see placements sometime relatively soon. I think one of the things that is not explicitly part of this continuum is permanent supportive housing, which is really, evergreen, if you will, long-term, non-time limited housing subsidy and ongoing, very robust social services. And that's simply because it tends to take a little longer to create, both from either from a locational standpoint, because that we do sometimes build, right, create units through our housing programs, but that we're really trying to, to bridge and find linkages for those people who need it. Separate conversation, as a city, we have a pipeline of PSH units and programs that we've been nurturing and cultivating. And it is my hope that fairly soon we'll be in a position where we'll begin to have, whether it's scattered site, but you've got a housing subsidy, a voucher that is long-term, it's not going to go away, and that you have continued case management, or that we will have a chance to open up one or more of our permanent supportive housing apartment complexes. We actually just closed on a hotel today, the bungalows on Mopac, which we'll be working with Integral Care to convert to PSH. So super exciting. And that will, I think, add to that sort of portfolio of placements that we know some people may need.
Great, thank you. Actually, Commissioner Ramirez, I would love to get a comment from Carly Jo Dixon and Sasha Rose at this point, if that's okay with you. And then we can, perfect. Do you want to set up, or do you just want to go ahead and have Carly Jo and Sasha make their comments?
Yeah, if you guys just want to introduce yourselves briefly before you speak, and that's it, I think. Yeah, that'll be great.
And you are both on mute. You can unmute yourselves.
I'm more than happy to start. Thank you all so much for inviting me today. My name is Carly Jo Dixon. I'm an attorney with the Texas Fair Defense Project. At TFDP, we aim to stop the criminalization of poverty. And what that means practically for my work is that I stand in the gap with direct services for folks who are entangled in the criminal legal system, but don't have the right to appointed counsel. So that includes folks who are accused of and charged with Class C misdemeanors, such as the offenses under Prop B, that criminalize those experiencing homelessness. So what I have seen in the past couple of weeks is that law enforcement is now issuing tickets to enforce the camping ban. Last week, I had the opportunity to go out and speak with some of our unhoused neighbors who've actually received tickets for using their basic survival gear, such as tents. I want to pause as we're having this conversation just to reiterate that what is happening under our bridges and overpasses continues to be a humanitarian crisis. And the process of sending in law enforcement and others to push people into the criminal legal system is an added cruelty. Previous phases of Prop B enforcement have included outreach. APD has been handing out outreach materials. It is a list of phone numbers they have put together for the folks I know who have received those materials and tried to call those numbers to get assistance. They have been dead ends. Outreach doesn't work if there's no capacity. And right now there is nowhere to go. I know we just heard about the HEAL initiative. Most of the camps and the encampments in the city do not fall under that plan. And under Prop B, there's a couple of things that are supposed to happen. Law enforcement is supposed to do three things. They're supposed to advise people before they issue tickets of where it is legal to camp. We know that there are no legalized encampments in the city of Austin, and it's not looking like there's going to be anytime soon. They're supposed to give people resources of available shelter beds and housing. There are no shelter beds. There is no housing available to people outside of the HEAL initiative right now. And they're supposed to contact someone from the city to transport them to services. That also is not what's happening. What we are seeing is law enforcement is giving tickets to people. I cannot find, in talking to people in these camps, why some people are receiving tickets for camping and others are not in the same encampment. What I can say is 2 of the men I talked to who received tickets for camping in July had visible physical disabilities. They had trouble standing, walking. One of them could barely get out of his tent because of his mobility issues. And in theory, Prop B has a catch-all for this. It says that it's an affirmative defense to prosecution if you have a disability, but that assumes that people are going to be able to get to court. The camping ban is now citywide, and so is downtown Austin Community Court's jurisdiction. If someone receives a ticket for camping at Slaughter Creek or up north, they're going to have to somehow figure out how to find their way to downtown Austin Community Court, which, very shortly won't even be housed in downtown anymore. I did some public information requests, and the information provided to me by downtown Austin Community Court said that people are waiting a year to get services from them. During that time, people are getting warrants, and they're getting further entrenched in the criminal legal system. We have functionally turned the condition of homelessness in the city into a crime. We're allowing the removal of outdoor shelter, and Prop B makes it more difficult for individuals to find actual permanent housing, sustain employment, get transportation, get medical care. If our aim is to not entrench people in the criminal legal system, we really need to look at person-centered, long-term housing solutions. The people I talked to are scared and they're confused. Many people said, I'm gonna go. The police have come to the camp, they've told me to leave, I'm gonna leave. But they're not moving into housing. They're going further into hiding. They've talked about going to the river, to creek beds, to woods, places where they will not have to interact with law enforcement. And there was a real feeling of desperation. One woman who has cancer told me she's been on the waiting list for housing, but she will probably die on the streets before she's housed. She pled with me. She wanted to know, why isn't she a priority? She's not in a HEAL camp. Shouldn't the fact that she's sick, that she's at high risk of COVID, mean something to get her into housing, into one of these pro lodges? She doesn't know what she's going to do when law enforcement comes to arrest her.
Thank you, Ms. Dix. Ms. Rose? AV, can you unmute Ms. Rose for her? There you go.
Thank you. Hi, yes, I'm the director of Austin Mutual Aid. You may have heard of us as we stepped up, and we're a grassroots organization. We're really a collection of smaller grassroots organizations that stepped up during the freeze. During the freeze, we went viral, and we were able to get nearly 500 people into hotels to shelter them during the freeze. They all went back onto the streets, of course. And my concern right now, and the concern that I'm hearing from many of us who do camp support, and for those of them who are in camp support, is that a lot of these camps do not qualify for the HEAL initiative. I've heard, I forget her name now, I've heard her share that there were 70, maybe 70, 20, maybe 100 people who were offered services thus far. We're hearing from a lot of people who are not in those main camp areas that are wondering what they're supposed to do. They've seen all the signs that say that they're no longer legally able to camp there, and they are seriously concerned they're not being provided the resources and alternatives that they were told, or that the Save Austin Now program was sharing that was going to be needed or going to be had. And so we're really concerned. We need at least one other government sanctioned camp. What happened with the one down by Esperanza was that the Other Ones Foundation was able to take care of that. It really seems like there is a gap between what the government is currently able to offer, what Integral Care, HEAL Austin is able to offer, and grassroots organizations are stepping in. We really need to be supported financially to be able to continue to offer these services. So right now, Austin Mutual Aid has a housing initiative of our own. We have at least a dozen people that we've put back into hotels. We're actually just prioritizing the most vulnerable people who have not at this point been offered any services. They have not been offered any alternatives. We have people who are in wheelchairs, who are, for whatever reason, unsafe. So we're really looking for more support and ways to work with the government as grassroots organizations. Let's see. Yeah, what we're finding with the people who we're putting in hotels is that many of them already have some type of criminal record. They have criminal trespass. They have tickets that they've received previously. So even in our own small little grassroots initiative, we're really struggling to find them permanent housing, and we're not having access to the same resources that you all do. So we'd really like to be welcome to the table. I appreciate being invited to this meeting. Thank you, Rebecca. We really would like to be welcome to the table in order to help bridge this gap of what's available. We have thousands of people on the streets, and what I've heard is we've offered 100 people housing. So we really need something to help bridge the gap. The city of Austin has earmarked $100 million for that. Esperanza is a good example of what can happen when grassroots organizations are allowed to and supported in stepping up and helping bridge that gap. I think that's it. I'd like to really, pass it off to Candace, who is one of our people who is currently in our program. Thank you.
Thank you. Candace, are you, can we hear you? I'm not sure if I heard.
Okay. I don't want to use my camera as I'm not, my hair's not brushing on it. But Sasha's group has really helped me. I was in the woods actually until Sasha put me in a hotel room. And being out in the woods, you know, I'm very vulnerable, and a lot of people are being pushed to an environment like that because of Proposition B. You know, I don't really know what to say. I'm a pretty strong woman. I've been on the streets here in Austin for 2 years, and I have good survival skills, but I know not everybody has that. Like, I was working on a documentary to shine some education on what it's like to be on this side of the fence. And, you know, I found some numbers that were really disturbing to me. Echo reported last year that there was 3,100 people in Austin that are disabled, but the number is closer to 5,000. And out of 5,000 people, 70% of that are people with disabilities. Out of 5,000 people, 34% of that, over 34% of that is families with children, you know? And so over 70% of the people have a disability, and we want to criminalize it, you know? I just think about the children that are not even counted in that head count. Like, it blows my mind. I have not seen anybody like actively going out and trying to, you know, get people into housing. And I just happened to stumble upon the Austin Mutual Aid group. You know, if it wasn't for trying to raise funds for my own nonprofit that I'm trying to get started, it led me to one person, which led me to Austin Mutual Aid. And, you know, they really have saved my life. My boyfriend just passed away. And so me being in a motel room, it's been like a huge godsend for me. But,
Candace, can you share about the COVID thing that you found, please?
Which one?
About the loophole, essentially.
Oh, yes. Okay. So House Bill 1925 goes into effect in September. And I was looking at it, you know, a couple of hours after it was passed. There's actually a loophole in House Bill 1925, which would give Mayor Adler the right to deem every camp in Austin as an emergency shelter site. I think it is in section G or H of the bill, but it talks about if we are under a state of emergency, or if a state of emergency has been declared, that the landowner has that right to deem it an emergency shelter. So I had my brother look at it, and he told me, you know, he thinks it's a valid loophole. And then somebody with the Appleseed legal group actually looked at it, and she said, yes, ma'am.
And I think the hard thing is that just on the fly in this conversation, I am not sure how to do that. The city has, as it usually does, picked this sort of conservative course, you know, that involves just driving right back into the criminalization system that it's always been comfortable with. It seems that we should be suggesting that they, you know, don't give anyone tickets until they actually have a stand-up system where people can be housed. That they just not be giving people tickets until the promise of another option exists, and it really exists, not in somebody's like imagination exists. I know that's not super helpful if we're trying to get this done in 3 minutes. But I think that's the bottom line. We just shouldn't be handing out tickets if we aren't providing people actual housing.
Any other comments or discussion? Commissioner Weber.
Yeah, I did want to hear from, Assistant Chief Henderson, if she can speak to, why a list of phone numbers is being given to people that leads to dead ends. If she could respond to that.
Please, Chief Henderson.
Yes, ma'am. Hello, everyone. I'm Assistant Chief Henderson. And just to clarify some of those items, we just had another meeting today with our community engagement officers. And so I don't have our current numbers from what activity transpired last week, but in our previous meetings, the number of citations that we've issued is 14 and we've made 0 arrests. And so as we were initially going through our implementation phase of Prop B, we were going through a series of education and awareness and identifying proper resources. As it has progressed and we're about to enter stage 4, the information that we were provided for those service providers is what we are then sharing with those who we're making contact with. So by all means, if there's inaccurate information or those numbers are leading to dead ends, I'll just need to make sure that our community liaison officers circle back with those resources and make sure that we have accurate information that we can provide when we're making those contacts.
Thank you, Chief Henderson. Appreciate it.
No, you're welcome.
Commissioner Weber, go ahead.
Quick follow-up. I wondered, Chief Henderson, if we could get those materials, like whatever pamphlet or whatever is being handed out as resources during the warning phase, if we could see those.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So unfortunately, we're at a time where we need to wrap up this conversation. So if we address the money, I think we have a round number that we can put in there to say, this is figures that we're talking. And then if we could speak to the point about Commissioner Bernhardt's addition of the fact that we recommend that the way the city move forward is obviously legal, keeps us out, but at the same time reinforces the point that we're recommending that these citations be halted until we actually have a vote to help these people, help these unsheltered neighbors of ours. Then would you be okay with that, Commissioner Bernhardt and Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes.
We added those 2 additions. Okay. So with that, I will take it to a vote, and then we can make sure we can send it out via email to make sure everyone's okay before we send it off to to City Council. Are we okay with that?
Sounds good.
Okay, AV, if you could take down the screen so I could see the panel again, that would be wonderful. And we have to take a verbal vote if you support or do not support this current recommendation. I will start with Commissioner Ramirez.
Yes.
Commissioner Weber.
Yes.
Commissioner Bernhardt.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Lewis.
Yes.
Commissioner Kirikoff.
No.
Commissioner Hassenflock.
Yes.
Commissioner Austin.
Yes.
I think I got everyone. And myself, I am also a yes. So the support of the recommendation passes. 1 nay, 7 ayes. Thank you very much, and we will send that via email once it is updated. And Commission, Interim Chief Brown, if you don't mind, if we could put you till the end so we can get through our other points, I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. That will take us